on most days. I love it when you stay late, but today I have to go. So who here is new? Who has not been with us before?
You man?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's true. But you still know who I am. Okay, so I don't need to introduce myself. Yay, that's good. Right. Last year, at the end of the year, you had requested information about writing and actual practice writing. And so this is my response to your request. We did part of this last year, so it will look familiar to those of you who took part in what we called it summary writing that time. And I was a bit ambitious in that because not only did I have annotation, but we were supposed to go from there to summary writing, and we didn't make it in an hour and a half. Because annotation took a lot longer than I thought it would. So now that I know that, I have divided this series into 4 sections. Today is the first section, and we're going to review annotation. And I have a new article for us from, of course, the New York Times. And this one I'll introduce a little bit later, but you're going to have practice annotating this. Now, the interesting thing about this article is it's actually really difficult. And I did that on purpose because you're teachers. So if you're like, this doesn't make any sense, that's not on purpose, but it's a little more complicated than what I would give an average student. Okay, so let's see. Next week we're actually going to your homework tonight, just in case you feel like you need to leave early. Your homework tonight will be to write a summary. And we will hopefully get all the way through to writing an outline on this board. And so you will use the outline and then create a summary. Next week I will give feedback on summaries, and then you will self-edit your summary. But we will also write a rubric for grading summaries. And then we will also write peer review forms for how you would get your students to look at each other's papers and review them. We're going to be very, very active. Well, you're going to be very, very active. I'll just be like, okay, did you consider this? Did you consider that? And after this, in our third session, you're going to pretend to be students, and you're going to do peer review on each other's papers. And then you're going to take the feedback, and you're going to rewrite the summary. And then we will have our 4th session will just be reflecting. So during these sessions, you're going to be both teachers and students. So put your thinking caps on like students, and then also be thinking, if something doesn't go smoothly, be thinking as a teacher, how would you make that more smooth in your class? You know, for example, if I give you some instructions and maybe they're not clear, how would you change that so you would do it better? That's what you always want to be thinking of. How would you change that so that the students would really get it? All right, so for annotation, these are the 2 things we're doing today. I sort of already introduced that. Annotation, if you remember from last time, is interacting with the text. I frequently refer to it as a conversation with the text. You might be thinking to yourself, how on earth can I have a conversation with the text? The author is not right there with me. But basically what you're doing is you're reading in such a way that you're asking questions, then you're looking at the text and you're getting the answer to those questions from the author. So in a way it is interacting as if you're communicating directly with the author in the way that you do it. Some of what you can do for annotation is that you're highlighting the main ideas. These highlights should be written in the margins. So you can see on my example, this is the margin, this like white space, right? And you can see that I have all kinds of stuff written in my margins on both sides even. And so the reason, why do you think, if you can remember, why do you think we want to restate it in 3 to 4 words? Why is that important? Yeah?
Just to avoid plagiarism. Plagiarism, for example.
Okay, that's one reason, absolutely. Avoiding plagiarism. Why else? Yeah, to make it short. Okay, why else? These are all correct.
To be used in annotation.
Can you say a little bit more about that? What do you mean to be used in annotation?
Well, when we will be writing the annotation, we will be using, will be like our sketch, a plan for future annotation.
Okay, this is good. So, one thing that I want to make clear is when I'm using annotation in this context, this is a reading annotation. This is only with the reading. What you're talking about is also annotation, but it's more of a academic annotation. And she's exactly right in that when we do an academic annotation, what we're doing is we are writing a summary of the work. We're writing the strengths and the weaknesses, and we would have to restate it in our own words. But our summary is not going to be this, we would call that an annotated bibliography, because we also have the information of the article. And that's exactly right. We create annotated bibliographies when we are going to write a research paper. But this is just a simple summary that could then lead students to learn how to do an annotated bibliography, but we're not that advanced yet. She's ahead of the ball game. Okay, what would be maybe one other reason that I might ask students to restate it in 3 to 4 words?
To give the main idea.
Yeah.
Highlight the main idea.
To what?
Highlight the main idea.
Highlight the main idea, yes.
Maybe to check understanding.
Mhm.
They may use their own words to convey the same ideas.
Exactly. I am looking to see whether or not they really got it. Because they can say, oh yes, this is a main idea, and they can highlight it or rewrite it, but not really understand what exactly it means. So by writing it in their own words and only using 3 to 4 words, that's hard. That's really, really hard, especially if the main idea is like 3 sentences, and you're like, oh my gosh, how can I make this into like 3 words? So it really makes sure that their understanding is deep enough that they can then go ahead and write a summary later. Good. So those, I think, were the primary 3 things that are the reason that we want to use 3 to 4 words for the main ideas. The next one, making connections between background information. Why would we want to do this?
What kind of background information? Always
In your mind, yeah.
Maybe just to support those ideas with your experience, with this kind of data from your experience.
Okay. And why would we want to do that?
To connect that material with your life.
Exactly. And why would we want to do that? Yes, exactly. You remember it better. When you're able to connect something with something that you know, you remember it. Like, think about when you learn a new vocabulary word. If you can make a mnemonic device to help, you remember it oftentimes because you're connecting with some prior learned information. So it's the same thing with when we're reading through the text. We're going to be more able to remember the important information if we make those connections. Also, because when we're looking at this text in a more critical way, and as I've said before, when I mean critical, I don't mean that we're criticizing, right? What do I mean instead of criticizing?
We are digesting the information.
Mm-hmm.
We're thinking over it.
Mm-hmm.
Analyzing perhaps information.
Exactly. We're analyzing, we're digesting it, we're looking at both the positives and also the negatives. So it's not just the negatives, we're looking for both the strengths and the weaknesses. Okay. Let's see, ask questions in the margins. Asking questions in the margins is just, again, to keep us active within within our reading. So when we come across something and we're like, wait a minute, I'm not sure I have enough information to really solve or to really understand what this person has said, what the author has said. So I ask a question like, you know, what research supports this example? And then later on, I might find the research, and then I have a deeper connection between the previous statement and the findings or the research. So you're going back and forth through just like in a conversation, right? You might go back and forth, go through questions, stuff like that, to get as deep an understanding of what the other person is trying to express as possible. Okay? So when I give you these, and I'll give you the handout in a minute. This is the handout. This is the thing that we're going to be annotating, the article. When I give you these, what I'm expecting is that you actually write on it. Yesterday, several people got zeros because they did not write on the article. The point is to write on the article. If you want to copy this and use it again in class, all the information that you need, it's from the New York Times. You can get it online and copy a better copy of it, right? So please write on the article. And it should look something like that, right? So you can see that this person is actually a teacher. And what they've done is they've highlighted like key concepts, and you see that they are just using 1 to 2 words to kind of make sure that they understand the gist of those important lines that really capture the meaning of the poem. And here, though, there's more important information that couldn't just take 1 to 2 words. These are like extra meanings. They're connecting it with other poems or other information of things that were happening around the same time. Sometimes with these, you have to use your background historical knowledge and connect it with what you know throughout history, other experiences where something has happened that is similar. So that's what this author is doing. This is another example from a student's work, and you can see that they go, even from the title, which we're going to do together in a minute, they're asking questions. They're trying to get as much information as possible. And then you can see here, they have color-coded everything. So whenever something is related to the title, they have written in yellow. Of course, the whole thing is related to the title, it's the topic. But like when it specifically draws on something about the title. What you'll also see is they have, in this context, this is not what we're going to be doing, but this is also okay. Everyone annotates differently. It's your personal style. They have put boxes around meaningful words or vocabulary words so that they know that they can revisit them. In some cases, they've also put meanings out to the side so that they know that. I think this one is actually, while it's related to the title, but it's also a main idea. This is key information that they have. So you can see that annotations, they're active. I kind of look at this like a conversation at a coffee shop. You know, the dialogue is interesting, it's colorful, it's exciting, it's all over the place. Your annotation can be that way too. Just because it's you and a piece of paper doesn't mean it cannot be colorful and exciting. So this is another example of an annotation. Now I know that you don't all have like 500 colored pins here today, so we will just probably use one color, but here's an example of this is actually one of my favorite pictures because the author wrote silliness to write, as in they're saying what they are writing is silly, and the person who is reading it pretty much says, then why do I have to read this? If you think it's silly, why are you bothering me and writing it down? So I think it's a little snarky, but really funny. So that's a little humor dropped in. So what we're going to do is, before I pass out the rest of the instructions, I'm going to pass out the article that we're going to look at today. And what I'd like for you to do is just look at the title. Okay, everyone, there should be enough for everyone. So just look at the title. There should be some hanging around. And then I want you to tell me what you think about the title. Perfect. 2 more? Can you grab that? Oh, 3? Okay. Okay, so the title. If you were to look at the title, what are the first things that come to your mind? The first thing, so let me back up. What I do with students is they don't know how to do this automatically, right? So I actually have to teach them and work with them on how to do this process. So what I'm doing right now is you're now in the student's shoes, and I'm going to go through the process of how to teach annotation to students. So, looking at the title, what are thoughts that come to your mind?
Difference between the lives of the rich and poor, of the rich and the poor.
Okay, differences. I'm just going to put BT as between rich and poor. What else? Any other thoughts that pop up?
Maybe ambiguity of the word rich. You may be rich,
Okay.
you know, different ways of understanding it.
So actually then that can lead us into the question section. If no other thoughts are popping up, that's okay. The next step that we want to think about is what questions do we have for the author based on the title. So that might lead us into what is rich for the author. So what does it mean to be rich? Any other questions that you have from looking at the title?
Care about what? Yes, about themselves, about other people, about money.
So what do they mean by care, right?
What about the general? Is there anything wrong with our society?
Okay, so let's see. Sorry, this one is not working so well. What do we mean by care? Another one would be, is something wrong with society?
Because somebody cares less.
Is something wrong with, what, erase, okay. There'd be nothing worse than writing on this with a permanent marker. That would stink. The first one was, yeah, but then it died. Okay, I'll try it again. So what other questions?
Why do they care less?
Okay, why do they care less? And for me, one of my questions that I asked is, how do you measure this? How do you measure caring?
What about do they care less?
Okay, and so what do they care less about? Yeah. How about one more question? We've got room for one more.
Do they actually care about anything at all?
Okay.
Why should they care at all? Why we should care at all?
In order to be
Human
rich,
beings.
do we have to care?
Okay.
Perhaps it shows the negative attitude of the author to rich people.
No, but
That's a good observation. Yeah, why not? And then I might add that in a question. What is the attitude of the author towards rich people? Nice.
But we can't feel it.
judging by the title, we can't.
Why not? If there is something negative here, which means the author is against the people because they care.
Well, how do you
So,
feel?
so my question is it really so?
It's
Like people just
like
kill us?
the title
Is this the truth?
about the whole article.
Right,
They
really?
do.
I don't know, we don't know. We should
Okay, sorry, you can't really see that at the bottom, but it says, what is the attitude of the author to, number 2, rich? And it should say people to make it a complete question, but there's no room. But you'll get the idea. Okay, so, first with the students, sometimes they have more thoughts on...
Again, one more question.
Uh-huh.
Do only rich people just kill us?
Okay.
It's a good
Okay,
Why-
do only the
No,
rich
rich.
care less. No, that's great.
And why
We
should
have
people
to, yes, to
care?
compare actually.
Until what?
We already have why should people care. Okay. And I said why should we care? I
And why
forgot the
should we,
extra
yeah.
word. Okay, so back on track, folks. No longer students. Okay, so again, what I was saying is oftentimes I'll go through and with this first part, I'm trying to elicit from the students just general thoughts so they can write it down. Some of what I put down as a general thought is when I read this, rich people just care less, I thought, well, I wonder if what he is going to be talking about, he because it's Daniel, is that they are separated by class from the rest of society, and therefore they're separated by society. So maybe that's one of the reasons that they care less, if this is what it means. I also had what is rich, like how do we define rich, and who is this article gathering the information about was one of my questions. How did they access this information, and is it valid? And then I looked down a little bit to see the author, obviously, but then we see The Great Divide is a series about inequality. So when I looked at that, I wrote to myself, oh, this comes from a book or article series on inequality, meaning that this is only one of many. And so maybe all the thoughts and ideas are not going to be as developed here. Maybe. You will see. Because now, the next step, what I have the students do is I'll say, okay, now we have all these great questions. I want you to read the article and answer the questions as much as you can. If you cannot answer a question, that's all right. Just say no, or NA. What does NA stand for? Not applicable, that's right. So, now you're going to go through and do that, but actually before you do, I have to give you more. Okay. Please pass that back for me. Alright, while you're doing this and you're answering the questions, the other thing that I like to work with students on, okay, there should be enough in there. I just want to make sure. Ooh, I just stepped on your foot. Sorry. 1 second. Extras? No extras? Uh-oh. Okay, I will make extras. Can you help me? Can you share? Those of you who don't have one, can you just share for 1 minute? And we will have an extra for you in 1 minute, okay? So just look on with somebody else. So, what we're going to look at is we're going to skip the first paragraph because that's on summary writing. That's reading for you to do tonight before next week, okay? And we're going to go to where it says 1. Who can, yes, preview. So we just sort of did a preview, didn't we? We just had an example of a preview. Because one of the things it says is to go through and look at the title, right? So we just did a preview. If we were reading a longer article, we might also go through and we might look at the first sentence of every paragraph. But this one, the paragraphs are so small, if I tell you to do that, you're reading the whole thing. We might also look at other smaller titles within the article itself. And all of these, we're doing, again, this process where we're previewing, we're asking questions, we're trying to get more information. Okay? What's number 2? Right, read the article. Yay! And answer this question. Is that all it says?
Underline them all.
How much? Thank you. Why do you think it's 20%?
Because it can't be 100%.
Why not?
Because the main information is contained in only 20%. perhaps.
Yes,
The
but-
keywords, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Why 20? Why not 30?
Just I used to emphasize.
To choose the most important information.
Mm-hmm. So the idea is that with 20, you're sharing with the students that they're not supposed to do the whole thing. Because oftentimes students, when they first start annotating, they think everything is important. So they're highlighting everything, and then they go back and they have to reread the whole thing again. Because they highlighted everything. And so when you say you can only highlight 20%, it gives them sort of a visual, so they can go, ooh, I'm over highlighting. You know, because you can more or less tell how much you've highlighted. And you can kind of attach a percentage to that and figure out if you're over highlighting or under highlighting. Now, 20% was like the number chosen. You may have some people, I mean, it may be a very information dense article, and it might actually, sorry, that's my phone. I can't turn the sound off because it's broken. So I'm sorry that it just did that. But back to the topic, 30% could also be applicable, especially if it's a research dense article. But you want to make sure, the idea is that it's like under 30%, right? 20% seems to be about how much content is worthwhile.
But why doesn't he give any clues as to what should be underlined? What? The author just says underline 20% as you read. But what is the principle underlying this? Underlining.
Well, basically, what have you learned so far? What have I shared with you so far? What do you think the answer to your question is?
You mean the answers to these questions, or
The main ideas.
So
So-
everyone have their personal ideas, and that's why I like the big one.
Right. So when we go through, like, the thing is, when you give this to the student, it's not by itself, right? You're also still describing what it is you're expecting them to do. And we already talked about this. So we're highlighting the main ideas. Underlining is another way to highlight something. You know, if you don't have, like, one of those pretty little highlighters that make colors, you underline, and that's a highlight. So you highlight the main ideas, and then you restate them in 3 to 4 words, right? So it is a good question, but I think that from the teacher point of view, you have already explained that to the students. This is just a reminder to them of how much you should be highlighting. Because if I say this, they might still highlight 100%, but they're certainly not going to try to restate it in 3 to 4 words. So it's really just getting the focus down. Okay, number 4. We just did 3, right? Thesis statement. So, this is always a hard thing for students. What is a thesis statement?
The message.
The essence, the message, some people call it the argument.
Yes.
I frequently call it the argument. And so one of the things that we do with this, hi, please come in, there are seats available. One of the reasons why I start with annotation is because it's really, really hard to teach thesis statements. It's like one of the hardest things I've ever done as a writing teacher, because students don't quite get it. Sometimes I don't even quite get it. I'm like, well, this could be the thesis statement. In terms of writing a thesis statement, I'm okay, but it took many years to get there. And so this is a student's introduction, in a way, to thesis statements. And so that's why I want them, normally what I have my students do is right next to what they think the thesis statement is, to just write a TH, capital T, lower h, for a thesis statement. And so they've identified which one the thesis statement is. Otherwise, if it's just underlined, maybe they will forget that it was the thesis statement. Okay, so what I'd like for you to do now is I'd like for you to go through and I'd like for you to read, answer the questions, and do 1 through 4 on your piece of paper. Are there any questions?
Not yet.
Not yet? And what do you do with the actual piece of paper? You write on it. That is correct. Scribble away. Okay. This is, and I'll leave this up here as well. So what we're doing is we're going to read this. What we did was we looked at the title, and then can you see the board a little bit? We brainstormed like the first thing that came to our minds when we looked at the title, and then we came up with some questions. And so what we're doing now is we're answering all of these questions as shown by the reading. And we're also, so when it says highlight, we want to just find the main ideas in this and then summarize it in this space with 3 to 4 words. And then after that, you also, if you have any background knowledge, like any prior experience with the topic, you want to just kind of try to make a connection. So if you read something and you go, that reminds me of, then you write, hey, connection between X, Y, and Z. Okay, and then I will get the other piece of paper printed. Oh, you got already, yeah. So, and then we're just putting 1, 2, 3.